New York City, fall of 1963. The kind of rain that slicked the streets and blurred the world into gold and gray had settled in. And on one of those soaked October Tuesdays, inside the historic marble-lined corridors of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, three young men were about to remind the world who really held the levers of power. These weren't hoodlums off the streets of Harlem. No, these were the sons of lawmakers, the grandchildren of moguls, princes of America's aristocracy. They were raised on foreign languages whispered by European nannies, pampered in estates larger than entire city blocks, molded since birth to believe the world was theirs by default. When they saw a young black woman standing alone in a hallway, they didn't see intellect or dignity, they saw something to claim, an opportunity to remind someone that even in a room of gold, some doors were still locked. What they didn't account for, what they couldn't fathom through clouds of entitlement and aged bourbon, was the silent presence waiting in the final bathroom stall. When they turned that lock, they didn't trap a girl inside with them. They sealed themselves in with something far more dangerous. This would later be known as the Waldorf lesson. The night didn't begin in a ballroom with string quartets and champagne. It began in a car, a sleek black Cadillac Fleetwood, rolling like liquid shadow down Park Avenue beneath the violet hush of a rainstorm. Inside the cabin, the air held a blend of cigar smoke, shined leather, and the faint aroma of something refined. Bumpy Johnson's cologne. In the back seat, dressed like a king returning from war, Bumpy sat still, eyes tracking the rain-soaked street beyond the glass. His tuxedo fit with immaculate precision, the kind of tailoring reserved for royalty. Next to him, his daughter Elise, 19, brilliant, elegant in a pale blue silk gown, clutched her hands in her lap. A literature student from Howard back in the city on a school break, she was the soft glow in an otherwise harsh world. Elise was everything Bumpy fought to protect, untouched by the blood or betrayal that built his empire. She quoted poets, played piano, and looked outside the car window with the unease of someone stepping into a world designed to exclude her. "Daddy, do we have to go in there?" she asked quietly. "That place isn't for us." Bumpy turned. His hardened features softened for her like they did for no one else. "Elise," he said, voice low and steady as thunder, "we belong anywhere we decide to stand." His eyes flickered back to the hotel. "They built fences, baby. But the dirt under that building belongs to no man, and it doesn't care what color your shoes are." A pause lingered, Elise watching that legendary facade of steel and ivory come into focus. "They hate you," she murmured. "That senator called you a menace on TV last week." Bumpy gave a small, knowing smile, one that didn't warm his eyes. "He calls me that out loud," he said, "then cashes my checks behind closed doors. Politics is theater, baby. We're just playing a different act tonight." The Cadillac slowed to a stop. A uniformed doorman ran forward with an umbrella, and Bumpy stepped out into the storm like the rain didn't dare touch him. He turned, held out his hand, and Elise took it. As her heels touched the red carpet rolled over the rain-slick concrete, cameras flashed, reporters leaned in. Bumpy didn't flinch. Elise held tighter to her father's arm. The hotel's scent was polished exclusion, orchids, old money, and waxed marble. Inside, the Liberty Gala was in full swing, raising funds for Senator Charles Whitmore, a man whose campaign marched under the banner of law and order, a phrase which, in 1963, meant one thing in private and another thing in print. The guest list was a who's who of protected power, bankers who crushed communities with the swipe of a pen, judges who treated warrants like loose napkins, moguls who gave speeches about crime while sipping champagne built on broken backs. And then the doors opened, and in walked the king of Harlem. The silence wasn't quiet, it was seismic. The ballroom reacted like a single body jolted from stillness. The shoulders of senators tightened. The clink of glasses stopped mid-toast. 300 people looked up and realized a lion had entered the enclosure. Bumpy Johnson didn't wait for invitations. He didn't read names on guest lists. When he wanted a seat, he bought the building around the table. And tonight, he needed a contract, a real one, something legit. something to build with, not bleed from. Elise felt the shift long before the whispers began, a strange kind of cold on the back of her neck. Everyone was watching them. "They're staring," she whispered. "Daddy, they despise us." But Bumpy didn't glance to either side. His gaze was forward, calm, unbothered. "Let 'em look, baby," he said. "They stare at lions in a cage, too. Doesn't mean they want to open the gate." His voice coiled around her, pulled her back into herself. "Head up," he added. "Tonight you're a queen. They don't own this ground more than we do." He cut through the room like a blade through velvet, smooth and unreadable. Not aggressive, just comfortable. And that comfort, that was the real weapon. The whispering intensified. He passed judges he'd helped out of debt, senators he once bailed from scandal. He saw secrets stitched into every tuxedo pocket and every pearl necklace. And he wasn't just walking through the gala, he was collecting. They knew he knew. He guided Elise to a small table beside the orchestra, not too visible, not too obscure. The perfect balance. "Stay here," he told her, brushing her shoulder. "Whitmore's waiting in the cloakroom. 5 minutes. Don't move. Don't drink anything. If someone speaks, you answer, polite, short, and sharp. You understand?" Elise nodded. The fear was back in her chest, but she trusted her father more than anyone breathing. "Please don't be long," she whispered. "This place feels cold." Bumpy hesitated, his instincts clawing at him. But this ballroom was surrounded by police commissioners, guarded to the teeth. Statistically, it was the safest place in the city. He kissed her forehead. "Remember who you are," he said, then melted into the crowd of black suits and cigar clouds. Alone now, Elise tucked both hands into her lap and sat still, almost too still. She focused on the music, tried to remain invisible, to minimize herself. But invisibility doesn't come easy to a black girl in a blue silk dress sitting at a table meant for kings. And across the room, where the shadows drank deeper and the bourbon poured stronger, the wolves had caught her scent. 3 names, each heavier than the last. Bradley, Carter, and Lance. They came wrapped in silk, sired by power with bloodlines that had bought cities and sold nations. Not criminals, something worse, entitled. Bradley was the judge's son, entitled, attractive, a predator in prep school clothing. Carter was built like a linebacker and twice as dumb, rescued from expulsion twice thanks to donations. And Lance was the quiet one, Whitmore's nephew, bored, poisoned by his own apathy. They'd been drinking since 4. Rich boy bored, not fun drunk, but mean. They lived lives without rules except the ones they enforced themselves. Bradley, cigar in teeth, scanned the crowd. His eyes glazed over senators and debutantes with indifference until they landed on Ulysses. His lip curled. "Since when does the help get guest tables?" he asked. Carter's grin followed. "Jazz singer on break, maybe." Lance smirked. "Looks lost," he added. "Playing dress-up. Should we help her find her place?" They didn't see Elise. They saw a trespass. They saw something that didn't belong, and in their eyes, that alone was a crime. They set their drinks down, with performative force, crystal thudding on polished wood like a starter pistol. One by one, they stood tall, adjusted lapels, fixed bow ties, and straightened their expensive shoulders. With synchronized ease, like a hunt practiced 1,000 times, they strolled toward her, 3 immovable shadows converging. Elise sensed it before she saw it. The air shifted, turned heavier. Bourbon drifted toward her like poison. The sounds of the galala, lauder, orchestra, delicate applause faded into static. Then they were there. The light above her dimmed as their bodies formed a wall of tailored darkness. No smiles, no charm. Just a slow, ugly assessment, the way a buyer inspects a stray wandering into a showroom. "Excuse me," Bradley said, not like someone seeking clarity, but like someone announcing their claim. His words slurred slightly with smug confidence, stained by the cigar wedged between his teeth. "I believe you're in my seat." Elise's heart stuttered, then pounded. She scanned the room, looking for her father, but he was gone. Lost to the crowd, she was alone. She inhaled, remembering his voice. "Be polite. Don't engage." With effort, she managed a tight smile. "I don't believe so, sir," she said softly. "This table was set for Mr. Johnson. Bradley turned to his friends. They grinned as if she'd punched her own ticket. He took another slow drag on the cigar, tilting his head so the smoke rolled deliberately toward her face. Johnson, he mocked, laughing coarsely. Don't believe I've met the janitor. Is he mopping up somewhere while you wait here for your prince? Carter leaned across the table now, his bulk moving closer. His hands hit the linen like they owned it. Just trying to be safe here, he said, fake concern dripping from each word. People get in who shouldn't. Security's tight. We'd hate for someone to accuse the wrong person of trespassing. His eyes narrowed. Who brought you here, sweetheart? Who owns you? Elise winced. That word, it sliced the air in half. Owner. The ballroom disappeared. The chandeliers, the polished floor, the gowns, all turned to dust. She stood, her chair scraping behind her. I'm going to the ladies' room, she said, trying to keep her voice from breaking. She moved to pass between them, but Lance slid suddenly in her path. A toe twist, a lean, enough to fence her in. Whoa now, he said, mock serious, the grin never touching his predator's eyes. We're being polite. Thought we'd teach you how to behave in places like this. Elise didn't reply. She ducked beneath his arm with the grace and speed of someone sneaking through danger. She didn't run. Queens don't run, that's what Bumpy always told her. But her heels tapped fast across the parquet, each click a countdown, each step a declaration. Her back tightened under their gaze. Their laughter vanished. Bradley's face twisted with something cold and poisonous. He hated being dismissed. In his world, he was the center. People didn't walk away from him. She's got a mouth, he muttered to his friends. Thinks she's above us. The last sip of entitlement boiled into fury. Let's go show her where she belongs, Carter said, eyes dark and unfocused. They moved quickly now, past security guards who'd seen it all and chose to see nothing, past cameras that recorded everything but truth. They followed her down the long corridor cloaked in velvet and mirrors, toward the quiet places, the ones where sound didn't carry. That hallway was made to intimidate. It was all silent footsteps and cold reflections, but for Elise it felt tight, suffocating. She approached the heavy mahogany door, pushed it open and entered the restroom. The sounds of the party were left behind, like a world she'd never belonged to. Inside was luxury masked as comfort, gold fixtures, uninterrupted marble, and mirrors that only told half the truth. Elise rushed to the nearest sink, cold water splashing against her wrists, hoping it could wash away the rising tide of panic. She stared at her reflection. Her wide, frightened eyes stared back. 5 minutes, she whispered. Daddy said 5 minutes. Just wait. But then the door creaked open behind her. Voices and laughter echoed for a breath before being swallowed again as the lock clicked into place. That single sound ricocheted off the stone like a warning bell. She spun. Her hands were still damp, trembling, clenching. There they were. Bradley, Carter, Lance. But now there were no clever lines, no grins. They'd shed the last layer of pretense. They moved like hunters trapped in a room with a kill they believed already theirs. This is the ladies' room, Elise said, her voice faltering as she backed against the tiled wall, her dress whispering against stone. You can't. Don't see any other ladies, Bradley interrupted, glancing around casually. He stepped further in, eyes scanning the stalls. Looks quiet to me. You sure you don't belong somewhere else? The three of them blocked every exit. She was cornered, breath shallow, mind racing. Bradley leaned against the tile, close enough for her to feel the heat of his breath, smell the rot of aged liquor and burnt tobacco. His voice dropped. Your kind is better when they remember their place. We're just here to offer some direction. Elise looked past him, scanning for anything, escape routes, objects, but her eyes caught something else. In the mirror, past their shoulders, reflections of the stalls. 1, 2. The third was closed, no light visible beneath the door, solid, immovable. Elise didn't freeze. Instead, her fear scorched itself into something colder, collected. Her father's voice echoed from that morning over coffee back home. A king never leaves his castle unguarded. She stopped shaking. She looked Bradley square in the eye, voice low and controlled. You made a mistake. Bradley blinked, confused for just a second. Then his arrogance returned. A mistake? He scoffed. Only mistake was ever thinking you deserved to be here. He leaned closer. And what mistake did I make, little girl? Elise's eyes slid to the reflection. You didn't check the last stall. The silence that followed hit like a thunderclap. They turned, instinctive and unsure, and looked. 1, open stall. 2, but the last one, closed. Still. Silent. Bradley snorted. Who you got in there? Janitor? Your daddy hiding on a toilet? The grin came back, but it died the moment the lock on the third stall clicked. It didn't open fast. The door creaked, moved with intentional slowness, no rush, no fear, just consequence. And then they saw him. Zip. Small, unassuming. Dressed in a too-big gray suit, holding a silenced pistol in one hand like it was nothing. His presence didn't shout. It whispered. And that whisper pulled the soul from a room. Zip didn't raise the gun. He didn't need to. He just looked at Bradley with eyes too dead to lie. Bradley's cigar fell from his mouth, the embers splashing against tile with a hiss. He backpedaled, bumping into Carter. Who are you? Zip didn't answer, just took one slow, deliberate step. Elise moved past them like the air parts for thunder. She picked up her purse, each movement measured, complete. He's my chaperone, she said. They were the ones locked in now. The three men reacted like trapped animals, primitive, exposed, disarmed not by force, but by the sudden realization that their world no longer protected them. Carter's hands lifted slowly, shaking in front of his chest like a man stumbling into traffic. Wait, he stammered. My father's. He's got powerful friends. I have money. Here, take my wallet. Just take it, please. He fumbled into his jacket, pulling out cash with trembling hands. Zip's eyes didn't flicker. He looked once at Elise, once at Carter, and then he smiled. But it wasn't a smile you'd expect. It wasn't a comfort or a kindness. It was the grin of something ancient staring down prey, something patient and cold. The room transformed again. The air grew thick. The silence wasn't simply quiet, it was dense, almost melodic. The only sound that threaded through it was a rhythmic drip from the faucet Elise had left running. Drip, drip, drip. That metronome of dread was too soft to drown out the weight of what was coming next. Zip didn't move. His stance remained the same, calm, composed, with his pistol proudly invisible in sound, but loud in threat. The muzzle didn't need to lift. Its intent floated between them, a string pulled tight and trembling. Bradley, Lance, and Carter stood in formation against the marble sinks, their designer suits clinging to sweat-drenched skin. Clothes that once screamed elegance now looked like costumes, ill-fitting ornaments decorating frightened boys. Bradley's upper lip twitched, sweat carving a trail through his powdered face, soaking his collar. But he didn't dare lift a finger to wipe it. Not with that gun. Not with those eyes. His gaze bounced from the pistol to the stall door he once mocked. He remembered locking it, sealing them in himself. Now the lock was their cage. His alcohol melted into something far colder and in its place unrelenting clarity. He was going to die. Here, in the most prestigious bathroom in the city, the recognition fractured him. Please, Carter whispered again, voice thin as a broken leaf. We didn't touch her. We didn't do anything. It was just talking. Zip didn't react, not even a blink. Carter hadn't spoken to a man. He had screamed at a shadow. Zip responded not with a threat but a gesture, his left hand rising slowly, and one rough, scarred finger pressed against his lips. Shh. That soundless, effortless warning carried more fear than a bullet. It was casual, like a mother quieting a crying child. It didn't just disarm Carter, it dismantled him. He froze, tears racing down his cheeks. Elise hadn't moved. She stood straight now, her breath ragged but controlled, like someone pushing through icy water. She watched the three figures who'd stood over her just minutes before. This trinity draped in wealth and entitlement, and now they lived broken, brittle. Their money, their names, their legacies ripped off like old wallpaper. But it was Zip who drew her attention again. Bumpy's shadow, the silent guardian. She'd feared him once, his silence, his stillness. But now, watching that unflinching hand, that weapon held like a paintbrush in the hands of a master, she felt something shift. Gratitude. Fierce, bone-deep gratitude. He wasn't just a man, he was a wall carved from every warning her father had ever spoken. Then, another knock. Not hard, not frantic. Precise. Measured. 3 short taps against the mahogany door. Ta-tat, ta-tat. Bradley jumped like a child touched by an electric wire. His knees nearly buckled. He turned toward the door, eyes wide and bloodless. He prayed it was anyone. Security, a waiter, a ghost. But deep down, inside the trembling wreckage of what was left of him, he knew. It was him, the real monster. Zip tilted his head toward Elise. She met that gesture with a stiff breath, walked to the door, and unlocked it. The latch clicked with finality, brass sliding like a sword freeing itself from a scabbard. Bumpy Johnson walked in. He stood framed in that gold-lit hallway like he carried the city behind him. The gala roared on. Dozens of feet away, a jazz band, laughter, politicians clinking flutes, and yet here, time had stilled. Elise looked up at her father as his eyes scanned her face with surgical precision. No bruises, no broken skin. Still, he checked, like a man examining a rare piece of glass for invisible fractures. "Did they touch you?" he asked, soft enough for only her to hear. Elise shook her head. "No, Daddy. I'm okay." Bumpy nodded once, but the warmth in him dropped away like a curtain falling backstage. He stepped fully into the room and shut the door, turned the lock. This time the click wasn't defensive, it was final. Then he walked, not at the boys, not toward Zip, but toward the row of sinks. He turned on the faucet. Cold water rushed from the spout, and he rolled up the cuffs of his shirt calmly, like washing away the day's clutter. Soap, lather, bubbles, he scrubbed. Bumpy washed his hands, as if taking part in a sacred ritual, a baptism of patience. Behind him, the 3 men barely dared to breathe. When he finished, he reached for a towel, not paper, of course, but soft, white linen. He dried 1 finger at a time, unrushed. And only then did he finally turn toward the boys. He leaned against the sink, ankles crossed, pupils sharp enough to carve into steel. "Do you know what this room's worth?" he asked, voice low, polite. "Per square foot? More than a man's annual salary. I've bought tables in this hotel. I've written checks that built its wings. I fund the campaigns of the man you came here to toast. And for that, I expect something." He paused, steady, respect. He turned his gaze to Bradley now. "You followed my daughter. You waited till she was alone. You locked the door. You tell me," his voice bent slightly, "why?" Bradley's tongue stuck to his teeth. He fought for words. We were concerned." She looked confused. "Alone. We just." Bumpy's head nodded once, sharp. "Don't," he cut in. "Don't spit on my shoes and tell me it's rain." That voice changed. Dense. Final. "You're not sorry. You're scared. That's different." Bradley opened his mouth again, but Bumpy raised his hand, halting words like a traffic signal. "Let's skip to truth, shall we? You saw a young black woman sitting at my table dressed like royalty, and you decided it offended you. She didn't belong. Not because of her manners, not because of her place card, but because her skin was darker than yours. The room seemed to breathe with him. She was just another toy to you, an ornament you could admire, then break." His voice dipped lower, colder. "But you missed something. You locked that door thinking she was trapped in there with you. Truth is, boys, you locked yourselves in with me." Bradley's hands trembled. He tried to steady them, tried to straighten himself, to reclaim the illusion of status. It was a joke," he muttered. "A bad one. I didn't mean anything. Bumpy arched an eyebrow, not in surprise but in disapproval so cold it could stop blood. A joke, he repeated, casually tasting the word like it was spoiled wine. Then he looked at Elise. Baby, did you laugh? She shook her head slowly. No, Daddy, it wasn't funny. His eyes settled on Bradley again. See, that makes it a bad joke, a failed one, and there's very little mercy for liars using humor to disguise cruelty. Bumpy inched forward, just enough to close the space between him and Bradley. He reached out and calmly adjusted the boy's bow tie, fingers grazing the exposed pulse beneath his neck. That tiny throb, panicked and uneven. You look unkempt, Bumpy said, voice like velvet dragged across fire. Your father would be ashamed. Not of what you did, mind you. He's done worse, I'm sure. No, he'd be ashamed because you got caught. That's the true sin among men like him, isn't it? The room was soundless. Even the faucet now ran silent. Bumpy took a step back and let his gaze sweep across them. 3 boys dressed in privilege, defanged at last. You 3 float on cushions. Your father's made sure of that, he said. Crash a car? Insurance. Fail a class? Endowment. Assault a girl? Her silence is bought. The world has always cleaned up after your messes. His voice dipped, words slow like they were being carved in tombstone marble. But not tonight. Tonight, this playground is closed. You're not in your father's house anymore. You're in mine. He turned slightly. Zip. The name alone shifted the weight of the air. Zip moved like mist, unholstering his weapon with mechanical ease. But instead of firing, he reached again inside his jacket and pulled out something far more intimate. A straight razor. Its handle was pearl, the blade hard steel. He held it loosely, gently, almost lovingly in his hand, like a memory. Its presence changed the air again. Panic replaced arrogance entirely. A gun was distance, but a razor was personal. Carter crumbled. He couldn't hold himself together. He sobbed once, knees buckling down toward the marble, collapsing him like a failed sculpture. Please, he sobbed, I have money. I've got it right here. Wallet, cash, a check. 10,000. Just let us walk. We won't say a word. At that, Bumpy laughed, but it wasn't joy, it was pity. 10,000? He echoed incredulous. You think my daughter's dignity is worth that? You still think money is how the world is measured? He breathed deep and peered down at him. You'll need your money. Might help buy you courage. Or cleaner pants. Then he shifted to Elise. Baby, your shoes. She looked down. Pale blue silk pumps. One stained on the toe. A smudge of filth from Bradley's incivility. A tiny drop of something that didn't belong there. Bumpy's voice lowered. That right there is their footprint. A mark they left as they tried to trample over your dignity. His expression hardened. Bradley, knees. The silence was thick. Bradley didn't move. He stared at Bumpy as if he'd just spoken an alien language. I what? Your knees, Bumpy repeated, pointing to the smudge. Clean her shoes. Bradley froze. Not out of principle, but out of disbelief. He wasn't raised to kneel. His family hadn't taught that posture, not even in prayer. I can't. Bumpy didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He merely turned to Zip. Zip's hand flicked once, fast. The razor snapped open with a sound like truth unsheathing itself. That glint of the blade, that shimmer of surgical threat, sliced the final remnants of defiance. You can, Bumpy said. You will, or you'll limp for the rest of your life. Knees or kneecaps. Your choice. Bradley trembled, shoulders tensing as the moment overtook him. Slowly, agonizingly, he sank. First one knee, then the other. His tuxedo bent with him, crumpling the illusion of power into a puddle of wool on marble. Carter followed, already broken. Lance did too, swallowing whatever scrap of pride he had left. 3 heirs to fortune on their knees in front of the girl they tried to unmake. Bumpy stepped away. From the side table, he reached into a basket and pulled out one crisp white cloth. He threw it at Bradley. It landed on his shoulder. Now, he said, Apologize. Not to me, to her. Bradley reached out with one hand, trembling almost uncontrollably, and pressed the cloth to her shoe. He wiped it gently, slowly, as if afraid the silk might fight back. His breathing was jagged. He couldn't meet Elise's eyes. Not now. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "Louder," Bumpy ordered. "She deserves your full voice." Bradley inhaled, then whimpered, voice cracking open. "I'm sorry," he said again, louder. "I'm sorry for what I said, for what I did. I was wrong. I'm sorry I scared you." Elise looked down at him. Sweat beaded on the crown of his neatly parted hair. He sniffled without shame now, broken wide open. And yet she felt no power, no rise of triumph, no revenge satisfied. She just felt sadness. For someone who only stood tall when lifted by generations of unchecked wealth. A boy dressed up as a man, now laid low like a child. She looked to Bumpy. "Daddy," she said gently. "That's enough. Let them go. They're already broken." He turned and studied her, really looked. And in her eyes he found something beautiful, restraint, grace, the kind of mercy only the strong can offer. He gave a single nod, adjusted his suit, then looked at the three men now rising to their feet, all knees stained, dignity shredded. "Go," he said, "but remember this night. Remember it every time you sit in your expensive leather chairs or kiss your senator fathers goodnight. You're not untouchable, not anymore." But just as they approached the door, freedom only steps away, Bumpy's voice called after them. "Wait." The three boys froze mid-step, the illusion of escape snatched back with a single syllable. They turned, slowly, fear dragging at their movements like wet cement. Bumpy stepped out into the hallway behind them. He didn't rush. He strolled, a man in no hurry, because when you hold the leash, time obeys you. Ahead of them, on the wall, a payphone, a sleek black rotary, glinting beneath the chandelier's soft shimmer. Bumpy approached it, reached into his inner pocket, pulled out a single dime and fed it into the slot with a soft metallic clink. He lifted the receiver, dialed with deliberate swiftness, each click of the rotary dialing fate like it were a weapon. He didn't look at the boys. He kept his gaze on the phone. "Justice Vanderhav," he said smoothly into the receiver, voice instantly morphing into something sleek and political, full of oiled charm. "Ellsworth Johnson here. I hope I haven't caught you too late. I'm calling from the Waldorf. There's been an incident." Bradley turned ashen. His knees knocked lightly as he whispered so softly it barely had breath. "No, not him, please." Bumpy kept speaking. "Yes, your son. Bradley. He's here. With me. No, he's not injured. No bruises. But the situation? Yes, I'd say it's compromising." The silences Bumpy left were calculated. He let the man on the other end fill them with worry. "Yes, Justice. Inside the ladies' restroom. With my daughter." Elise watched the men wilt with each syllable burying them under the truth they could never talk their way out of. "No, not a misunderstanding," Bumpy continued. "He and his friends followed her there, locked a door, and now they're standing here realizing they've made the worst decision of their lives." Another pause. Then Bumpy extended the handset toward Bradley. "He'd like a word with you." Bradley looked at the phone like it burned brighter than the sun. One trembling hand reached forward. He took the receiver. His voice, now stripped of entitlement, trembled into the receiver. "Dad?" Silence overtook him. Not his own, but his father's reply. Elise saw his whole world cave in as he listened. His mouth twisted. His chest collapsed. "Yes, sir. I understand. I won't come home tonight. I get it." He handed back the phone, eyes blank. Empty. Bumpy returned it to the cradle gently, like closing a coffin lid. Then he looked at the boy who was once so sure of his place in the world. "What did he say?" Carter asked, his voice a cracked whisper. Bradley answered without life. He said, "If there's a police report, if this hits the papers, I'm finished. Cut off. A liability." He said, "I'm on my own." Bumpy nodded slowly. He stepped in so close Bradley could smell the smoke and cologne laced into the lapel of his custom suit. "Then let me leave you with the truth," he said quietly. "You're free now, but you'll never be safe." He leaned down, his voice slicing like a straight blade. "You know now, the walls your father built to keep people like us out, they're made of paper. And I got the match." And just like that, the evening ended for them. Bradley, Carter, and Lance burst through the double doors and into the fresh air like convicts leaving the gallows, only instead of chains, they carried the weight of knowing that power has limits. The rain came down hard outside, trenched them within seconds. They waved frantically at a passing cab piled inside, the door slamming shut as though they could trap themselves away from what they'd just endured. They disappeared into the city they once thought belonged to them. Back inside, Bumpy looked at Elise, the heart of all of this. He pulled a clean white handkerchief from his pocket and dabbed gently at a streak of mascara on her cheek. "You okay, baby?" he asked. His voice, so sharp a moment before, was now back to molten calm. Elise nodded. "I'm okay," she said, voice steady with quiet discovery. The world, she realized, hadn't cracked her. It had revealed her strength. Bumpy offered his arm and she slipped hers through it. "Good," he said, "because we've got a contract to sign, and I hear the peach cobbler is something special tonight." They walked back through the hallway, the very same one that had crawled with menace just minutes ago. But with Bumpy by her side, Elise didn't feel cold anymore. She didn't feel watched. She felt seen. She held her head high, and when they entered the ballroom again, the crowd moved like water around them, parting with both awe and discomfort. Whispers followed again, but none of them touched her. None of them mattered now. Elise scanned the room, the suits, the pearls, the polished masks of power. But now she saw the fragility beneath them. She looked into faces that had shaped laws, bought mayors, sold blocks, bankrupted boroughs, and she saw, for the first time, that fear wasn't exclusive to people who looked like her. The mighty trembled too. And she? She was the daughter of the man who made them tremble. They returned to their table, the same one they had claimed at the start of the evening, now reclaimed with quiet glory. A nervous waiter approached them, hands twitching slightly. "See, can I get you anything, mister?" "Johnson?" the man asked. Bumpy looked across the room. The table where the three young men had once sat was now empty. He lit a cigarette. "Yes," Bumpy said. "2 coffees, black." The waiter hurried off, as if speed could erase what had just happened. Bumpy leaned back in his chair, satisfied. He watched the smoke drift lazily upward, curling toward crystal chandeliers that sparkled in defiance of the storm that raged outside. Around him, people whispered, smiled too tightly, pretended nothing had happened. But Bumpy knew better. He knew the truth. It wasn't about money or politics or the weight of names stamped on old buildings. Power was simpler than people believed. Real power? It was what you wield when the door locks. It's who still stands when the cage door swings shut. Real power is who holds the key. And as the band shifted into a slow, soulful blues, Bumpy tapped his foot softly to the rhythm. The message had been delivered. The tuition had been paid. The cunim was intact. And the guards were everywhere, even in the last stall. And so, as the slow jazz hummed beneath chandeliers that still sparkled like nothing had happened, the truth lingered in the air like smoke. Not every lesson comes through books. Some are taught in locked rooms without a syllabus, just silence, fear, justice, and control. In a world built to cage some and crown others, Bumpy Johnson never asked for a crown. He took the keys and made sure his daughter would never need to borrow them again. If that story made your heart race, your blood boil, or gave you chills, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more real, untold stories like this, and share it with someone who needs to remember power can be stolen, but respect is earned. What would you have done if you were in Elise's place or Bumpy's? Let's talk about it in the comments.